Hello and welcome to Doubles and Trebles. That is Matt Pyman Hill and I'm Adam Smido-Smith. We're back to look at the Premier League. Once again, night 15 is upon us this week. There's only 2 weeks left. And of course, where we always start is we take a look back on last week. And there's only one place to start last week, Pyman, where Gerwyn Price got his first win. Well, he made his first final, actually, since week number 3. It took him another 11 weeks to get to a final, and he won the final as well last week in Sheffield, beating Michael Van Gerwen in a pretty entertaining final. 6-5 went to a deciding leg. We said that Gerwyn Price and a cluster of others, including Michael Smith, Gary Anderson, etc., needed to win a night to keep their hopes of the playoffs alive. And Gerwyn Price has certainly done that. He's now on 18 points, breathing down the neck of Peter Snakebite Wright in fourth, who's on 20 points. So it is really starting to heat up the run for the playoffs, or that fourth spot. As we identified a few weeks ago, there was 4 or 5 players only playing for one spot. Gerwyn Price and has put his name right in the hat to clinch that, Pyman. What did you think of week 14 and particularly Gerwyn Price?
Yeah, well, actually, I've got to be honest, anyone that watched last week will have seen me write off Gerwyn Price. So let's get that out of the way nice and early. I said that I didn't like what I'd seen from him, but there's always this danger that, given it's only 3 games, Gerwyn Price's main struggle this year has been getting through over that first hurdle. Far too many times we've seen him go out in the first round. Once he got into that semi-final, it was quite an attractive evening for him, to be honest. And even a clash with Van Gerwen in the final, by the time he's had a couple of wins under his belt, at the end of the day, it's Price versus Van Gerwen, and the form book kind of goes out the window if Price fancies it. These two have been playing each other, 50, 60 times over the last 5 years. So, recent form can only count for so much if they're both up for it. And Price very much was up for it. We said he probably needed to win a night to reinvigorate this campaign. Yeah, I didn't see him doing it, but fair play to him. He showed what we all know he's got in his locker. He had plenty of bottle, and that game against Van Gerwen would have been very easy to kind of roll over and accept that Van Gerwen was probably going to beat him there. But what he did is he dug in, and it even went to a last leg, and he had the benefit of throw, which hasn't always been as big a benefit as you would think it had been, but he managed to convert it. And I thought there was some really good performances on the evening from Price. Van Gerwen, another rock solid week. But a bit surprised to see Johnny Clayton go out early, but hey, you can't be doing it every week to this standard. You're gonna have the odd. You're gonna be on the wrong end of the odd one. And as for Michael Smith, I mean, anyone that follows the darts away from the TV circuit will know that he'd won back-to-back Pro Tour events, as I'm sure we'll touch on later on. So he was coming into it in good form, and he was really unlucky. He really chucked it against Van Gerwen. We should have had a much more interesting lineup, because Michael Smith, as we said on last week's preview, was right in the mix as well. Unfortunately, I think that was probably a crucial moment in his campaign, and typically as it's gone, kind of ended up going against him there. But yeah, fair play to Gerwyn Price, and we've got very interesting last couple of weeks on the cards now.
Yeah, and as a result of week 14, a couple of bits of admin to confirm, if you like. Price's win in the first round against Gary Anderson mean that Anderson can now officially not make the playoffs as a result of that. He never looked in any trouble against Cullen in the semi-final. Cullen coming straight into the semi-final, having got a bye in the first round due to James Wade's withdrawal. So we're gonna cover that a little bit later, James Wade. But yeah, Cullen, like you say, Pyman, it's happened to a couple of players this year, and they're coming at the semi-final stage, and it's maybe a little bit difficult to get going over that short format against someone that's already been up there and had a game that night within the last hour or so, let's say. And then, as you say, Pyman, a lot of the form can go out the window. And it still probably is the biggest clash in darts, personalities-wise. We can say what we want about Peter Wright winning world championships and Johnny Clayton being right up there. They are on quality, but as a one-off game, you'd like to watch Gerwyn Price against Van Gerwen every week if we could. And it was typical Gerwyn Price, really showing some of his questionable tendencies. He dropped a hell of a lot of darts on the floor. I know he does that anyway, but it looked more than a little bit accidental to me, if you see what I'm saying, against Van Gerwen, but got the job done in the end. Big celebrations, as you would expect, between the two real big guns. But yeah, Price now just 2 points behind Snakebite, and the race is definitely on. Snake looked poor to me. Again, he's had some really poor performances along the way in this Premier League campaign. 6-1 first round defeat to Van Gerwen. He just never looked in it. Van Gerwen was about 13 points ahead on the averages. Johnny Clayton, you touched on him. That was his first round exit in 8 weeks, Pyman.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Michael Smith bettered him in the last leg decider. Doesn't happen often. Ferret's got a fantastic record in last leg deciders, not only in this Premier League, but generally. And like you say, Smith carried his recent upturn in form, made the semi-finals for a third week running. We're going to touch on what he did on the tour. MVG beat him in a deciding leg. Smith's probably coming away from that game thinking he probably should have won. But yeah, he remains the only player, even after 14 events now, Smith, the only player not to have won a night this season, and he will quite simply have to win one or even two of the remaining nights to make the playoffs. And it looks a long shot at this stage. He's got a terrible draw this week, which I'm sure we'll come on to. Also, as a result of last week, despite not winning the night, Van Gerwen has confirmed his qualification into the final four, the playoffs to take place in Germany. So there's 2 weeks left. He can sit comfy, as can Johnny Clayton, as we already knew. Looking on to this week, Pimer, week 15, of the rejigged kind of schedule towards the end of the Premier League campaign, as you touched on last week's video for us. We're at the O2 in London, usually the place of the finals. I think it's been virtually every year the Premier League's been going, the finals night has been in the O2, but not this time round. This is week 15. I've got my eye on one man in particular, Pyman, and that's Joe Cullen. I think that he's got a good draw, and I tell you why. The top half of the draw consists of Price, Clayton, Smith, and Van Gerwen. You could argue, without much doubt, really, that them four are the form players at the moment. And the bottom half of the draw: Wade, Peter Wright, Joe Cullen, Gary Anderson, who's already gone. That looks wide open. So the guys at the bottom half of the draw are gonna want to be winning. Joe Cullen has to win pretty much to keep his hopes alive. He's on 17 points. A night win could take him into the 20s and into that green zone, if you like, or the qualification zone. So I've got my eye on Joe Cullen. Who have you got your eye on at this stage, Pimer?
Well, I could definitely understand the Joe Cullen angle, and sometimes the draw in this tournament does just throw up interesting angles, and I think that bottom half, as you touch on it, is particularly interesting this week. And we've also got these concerns over James Wade. At time of recording, there's not really been any update since he opted to, well, I'm not sure he opted to, he physically couldn't compete last week. I mean, there was a bit of talk that he came out of hospital and was travelling back to the UK, etc., but then a swift statement from the PDC saying that he wouldn't be competing. We obviously didn't see him at the Euro Tour over the weekend or the Players' Championships recently. So, I wouldn't be particularly confident that Wade's going to compete this week. He's in this semi-comfortable position in third, where it's got to take a bit of a freak set of results for him to go out in these final
7
weeks.
points clear, Pyman, of the.
Yeah, so you're basically looking at, a freak scenario where two of these guys chasing him out of the spots both get to the final, and then you need a bit of bad luck on finals night as well. He's virtually through. For me, he's got to be prioritising his health longer term and making sure he's fit and firing to go for finals night. And I can understand wanting to come back next week in Newcastle, for a tune-up almost. But yeah, I wouldn't be 100% sure he plays here. And by the time you're watching this, I may look a fool. He may be confirmed to play. I usually do. So we have to look at this bottom half and say theoretically James Wade may not play. Gary Anderson is out. Now it's never that straightforward, of course, but that would lean towards Peter Wright and Joe Cullen both making it to the semi-finals. You've got Peter Wright a 9-4 chance to make the final, Joe Cullen an 11-4 chance to make the final. So I think if you have an impassioned opinion on either of these two guys, you've got to be looking at that market, because this is a massive opportunity in terms of an edge. If Wade potentially doesn't play, it will, to my knowledge, be it'd be a 6-0 and it won't affect your outright bet at all. It'll just be classed as a win. So, unfortunately, I really don't want to get with Peter Wright at the moment, because if it was any other player, I'd be like, well, he's maybe only got to win 2 games. But would you back Peter Wright at the moment on his recent form? Just to give you a quick statistic, in weeks 1 to 4, he won 6 games. In the 9 weeks that followed, he's won 5. So, other than that hot start, Peter Wright has desperately struggled in this tournament, not made a final since week 4. So I would not be in a rush to back him. And I think for that very reason alone, you're quite right. You have to be looking at Joe Cullen this week. He's got something to play for. We talked about it last week, but you're right. He did look cold. He did look like Price had had a game and he hadn't. This week, he gets that game in, and he gets that game in against Gary Anderson, who might not be that bothered. Now, that can work one way or the other, as we all know. Sometimes player turns up already out and will average 102. But on the law of probability, Gary Anderson, when he doesn't care, he can really down tools. It's great to watch. I mean, this is a man that's seen it all, done it all, multiple world champion, multiple major winner. He's got nothing to prove. When he's out of a taunt, I mean, Gary Anderson's literally just going there to pick his money up at this point. Now, I don't want to tempt fate with it, but I would be stunned if Joe Cullen doesn't put him away, to be honest.
I know, but Anderson's one of them, particularly if I get involved in this, even the match market, right? He's one of them that he could just turn up and everything just go in. But
of course,
I mean, all the evidence suggests. I mean, I didn't even think Gary Anderson should be in this tournament. But that's a whole different topic altogether. But I mean, it's one of them.
It kind of sums it up. That a lot of the weeks we've been talking about Anderson, he's been a 16-1 to win the night. He's 12-1 to win this night, and he's already out the tournament. But it's true. He's got a good draw, and if he just fancies turning up and causing everyone else problems. I remember when Wayne Mardle, you'll remember this, in the World Championship a couple of years ago, made some comments and they seemed to really rile him. And he talked out in his post-match interview about, everyone's writing me off. And he just come out and played fantastic for his next two matches, and it was like he needs that little bit of edge to get his best game out these days because he can't do it week after week anymore. We've seen him go deep in the World Championships 2 years in a row now, despite showing no form outside of it, really. So it is a very dangerous player to write off. But I think over this best of 11 format, really, this is a great chance for Joe Cullen. At 11-4 to make the final, it's a very interesting price, isn't it? And he is, just for reference, he's 8-1 to win it in the night. And we should probably talk about the top half a bit as well, to be fair.
Yeah, well, also in that Joe Cullen kind of mix, you've got to remember that, say James Wade isn't playing and Peter Wright gets a bye into the semi-final. He's coming in cold. That's the word you use, Pyman, and correctly so. And, Cullen should have the momentum from Anderson. But we've covered the bottom half of the draw enough. Welsh Derby in the opening game of the night, Price against Clayton. Price needs to win a couple of games to bridge the gap with Snake, particularly if Snake gets that bye. That will put. What do you get? 2 points for a win, Pyman, or what? 1.
2 points for winning your first game, 3 if you make the final, and 5 if you win it.
Yeah. So Peter Wright could be 4 points clear of going Price rather than just the 2 it is now, just by default. So yeah, Price needs to win another couple of games. You don't want to be leaving it till the last night and getting your calculator out. I
will just say, just to add a little bit to that, obviously Joe Cullen is a situation in itself, but what Going Price does know here that is if he does win that first game, gets his 2 point, and Peter Wright was to get knocked out by James Wade, completely theoretical, that would move them level on points. But the most important thing about Going Price's night is he's got to make sure he finishes in 5th after this night as a bare minimum, because next week, as we touched on last week, it's a bracketed draw and 4th will play 5th in the final league game. So, it puts your destiny in your own hands. It's very similar to the situation we're talking about in Premier League football with Arsenal and Tottenham, where as long as you've got that extra game in hand, it's kind of in your hands. Going Price needs to make sure he doesn't lose control of this. If Joe Cullen usurps him into 5th, then whatever he does on the night might not be enough. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough night for Price, really, because he's got Clayton, who's top of the table in round 1, and MVG, who's second in the table in round 2. And although they're both already qualified, they will not be down in tools, particularly against Gerwyn Price. Johnny Clayton's got a really good record, deceivingly good record against Price on the big stage, and MVG ain't rolling over for anyone, even if it was just Gerwyn Price and Michael Van Gerwen in the pub with no one watching. They would still want to be punching lumps out of each other, as it were. So it's not easy for him, but yeah, it's definitely a game of 2 halves in regards to the draw this week. I'm looking at Cullen at 8-1. I'm probably going to back that, to be honest with you, and I'm going to keep an eye on the James Wade fitness updates, and I might even do some betting skullduggery on the breaking news if and when there is any some. But I wouldn't advise that if you want to be keeping your accounts.
Yeah, it's one to monitor, isn't it? We've seen it before with this. And dart is one of those sports, maybe not so much the Premier League, but it can be a little bit slow to react in the markets. The main one that sticks out to me, and I'm sure yourself, is Players' Championships. We often get it where a Gerwyn Price or a Michael Van Gerwen is not playing, but they're still priced in the market as the favourite, and they prop up everyone else's prices, and you might get 2 or 3 hours to take advantage of that as you wish. Not that I'm, advising any such behaviours, but you have to be on the ball with these things. And I'll keep an eye on the PDC Twitter feed and James Wade's Twitter feed. You probably get you'll get an update of sorts between now and Thursday night, I'd say.
So just to run you through the prices, going price against Johnny Clayton, complete coin cost in the first game, 10-11 each of two. Michael Smith is 6-4 against Van Gerwen, 4-7. James Wade and Peter Wright's pretty much a coin toss as well. They're about 4-5 each. Joe Cullen's 4-6 to beat a 13-10 Anderson. All of them prices look pretty in line with my opinion.
They do. We should just say that Michael Smith has improved and he was fantastic at the Players' Championship, and it's a different kettle of fish. But he should have had Van Gerwen beat, shouldn't he, last week in the semi-final? He ended up losing it 6-5. He was well in command of that match, and as good as Van Gerwen was, Smith shows that he can very much live with him. He's a man in form, and
yes,
we've touched on it week on week. He's such a confidence player, Michael Smith, and he is playing well. He's had them couple of wins under his belt, and I know that he was saying that he was thinking about skipping those two Players' Championships to have a rest, and he ended up winning them both. So that's 20 grand in the back pocket he won't have been expecting. I'm sure he's in good spirits, and it's now or never time for him. So yeah, wouldn't be adverse to him at 6-4 against MVG, but it's MVG at the moment, and it's hard to oppose.
Yeah, I mean, and Michael Smith's 9-1 to win the night outright, Pyman. I mean, he's got a tougher draw than most people, but yeah, that's where he is in the outright.
Well,
but
Cullen and Michael Smith would be the ones at the prices, wouldn't they?
Yeah, because they're the ones that along with going price for obvious reasons, they're the three that most need it. So yeah, but really quite interesting this week for me. I'm with Cullen. I'm going to back Cullen at 8-1 and hope for the best there. No doubt Gary Anderson will turn up and hit a couple of 9 darters, and everything will go in for Gary Anderson. But that's just how it goes for me. So you're on Cullen as well, Pyman?
I would put Cullen up as the pick, yeah, I think 8-1. But also that 11-4 to win the final. I know it's a little bit safer, but we are potentially talking about, a really kind run for him, and I could see why people would be interested in the Peter Wright 9-4 if he's potentially getting a buy as well. But it wouldn't be my party on current form.
It's like an each way bet, isn't it, Pyman? 5 on the 8s and 5 on the 11-4, and
exactly,
yeah, it's like an each way
perfectly
bet.
Perfectly summarised.
Right, okay, moving on to the any other business part of the chat. We've touched on Michael Smith's upturning form a couple of times. He won both Players' Championships in Wigan, Players' Championship 14 and 15. It was Tuesday, the 10th and 11th last week, something like that. Michael Smith won both days. Thoroughly deserved both wins, in my opinion. I know we watch as much as we can both days, Pyman, and we're on Darts Connect with a few bets ourselves. We want on Michael Smith, unfortunately, but I backed Rids on day 2 at 33-1. He made the final, and young Callum Rids averaged 104 in the final against Smith on the Wednesday, and he couldn't get anywhere near him. Smith was majestic on that Wednesday. Any pick outs from you there, Pyman? And anyone take your eye? Obviously Smith as well.
Well, there is always a few that take my eye, but I would prefer actually to just give credit to the winner on this occasion. I felt Michael Smith really, it was one of those where we spoke about it. There was a few big names decided to skip this. So Van Gerwen wasn't there, Price wasn't there, a couple of others as well. Clayton,
Wright,
unusual. Clayton Wade normally does turn up, so that was an interesting move for me, and be interested to see if that pays off for him on Thursday, because Euro 2 I'm sure we'll touch on as well briefly, but didn't really pay off for him there. Yeah, I just thought Michael Smith, fair play, he applied himself really well, as you have to on these days at the Pro Tour. You have to dodge a couple of bullets. He had tight matches, players had opportunities to put him out, but he seemed to enjoy being the man to beat this weekend. I don't know. I talk about it again with a mental aspect to Michael Smith's game more than other players. It's no coincidence that the weekend that the other big players have a week off, that he wins both. And I'm not saying he doesn't fancy it, but I think there is an element of him overthinking it sometimes when he plays other players. I've touched on it before. I really think he's a player who analyses who he's playing. I've heard him make comments before about, well, the draw opened up for me, or I should be beating these players and stuff. And, I'm not sure that's beneficial to him in the grand sphere of things. But one thing it does say to me is, if he thinks he should be winning, he normally does win.
He's been back to back before, hasn't he, Pyman?
He has. He did the exact same thing last year. Yeah. So he's got it in the locker, certainly on these kind of events. And for anyone who's watched our videos a lot, you'll know that I like to listen to the interviews of the players, and I think he's a particularly interesting man to listen to, because sometimes he just gives you a little insight into the way he's thinking. And
probably too much sometimes.
Yeah, it is. And I don't want to berate him, but we've discussed it before. Sometimes he's his own worst enemy, and you're looking for him to progress beyond that. And yeah, he's had a bit of bad luck, but also I think there is much more to come from Michael Smith once he gets that first big win. a lot of people, I'm sure, will agree with that.
Couple of things on Michael Smith before we move on to any other players. In that final, I was watching with a vested interest, having backed Rids at 33. I can't recall one visit of Michael Smith where he missed two or more darts at a double. If he was coming to the board with a 2 dart combination, obviously he's hitting the big number, and then he's taking out the double as well. He was brilliant on his doubles. And Dan Dawson mentioned in comms a few times, they reckon he's got some sort of foot injury, not a terrible one, but he's being careful with I think his lead foot, his right foot, and it was meaning that he wasn't walking with the last dart, and he was better for it. I don't know whether that is injury related or it's a conscious decision from Smith to not walk with the last dart, and he very much needs to do it, and it very much helps his game. Moving on to any other players that stood out for us, we both backed Damon Heta both days, and how he didn't make the money. I know we've said this before actually, but he's just so that first day opened right with all them players missing, big five if you like, were all missing. Luke Humphries was the favourite with some bookies on that day one, closely followed by Smith. He went out first round, Luke Humphries, but Damon Heta was 22 to 1 both days. You got a run for your money both days. He landed the place money on the first day, made the semi-final, and then the second day, I think he went out to Smith in the quarter-final. But yeah, getting a run for your money from Damon
right choice was in the quarters. But yeah, he was brilliant both days. Just really unlucky. I mean, if you scroll down Dart Connect for virtually any Players Championship, you'll notice there's one man that just always has the 100 and something average. Yeah. It's always that little Australian flag, and it's like, if you don't follow it at this level, trust me, like, he's been doing sensational things on the floor this year, and it will not be a surprise when he turns up to one of these TV titles in the third quarter of the year, when we have 3 or 4 in a row and he makes a final or he wins one. It will not be a surprise, and I hope that we are on to benefit, because there
will be people like the UK Open, I know, is in March, that's over 3 days. I think it's only a weekend, but when we get, so there will be people that's not really seen any dots, particularly on Sky, because that's not on Sky, from the World Championships to the Grand Prix, whereby a tournament that takes place on a week or more. We've got 3 of them now until the end of the year, 4 if you include the Grand Slam, and they're going to think Damon Heta. No, I've not heard from him. He went out reasonably early in the World Championship the last couple of years, and me and Pieman are here banging on about him. He's going to rock up there at, I don't know, 33 to 1 maybe, and we're going to be backing him, and I think we're going to continue doing that.
We're going to profit from it eventually as well, because he's just playing simply too well not to. And yeah, you're right. There's a lot of people who just don't follow surface level darts. I talk to people when I play darts who, outside of the Premier League, they don't, and some of these players that slip off the radar when the Premier League's on. People say, "Oh, what's happened to Dimitri Vandenberg? What's happened to like really,
Souza,
really top players?" De Souza, who we saw had a good run at the Euro Tour. Rob Cross, who again good run. So it's like out of sight, out of mind. And these sort of summer into autumn tournaments is the time to strike with these players, because trust me, they haven't gone anywhere. And that probably brings us on to Luke Humphries on the Euro Tour, who is phenomenal.
Yeah, so it was the Euro Tour number 6 over the weekend.
In the
Czech Darts Open, again, where the qualification process looks pretty random to me. But some of the top players turn up, and Luke Humphries played some fantastic stuff en route to winning. I think he's won 2 Euro Tour finals now. Beat MVG on the stage again. He's making a habit of that, definitely. He's without question, Luke Humphries, in the same category as Damon Heta, who we've mentioned. They are without any question a threat to any major that takes place. These two fellas. We've seen Humphries make a UK Open final in 2021. He's doubling. He's getting better all the time. More consistent, more measured, just better. And his scoring is there for all to see. You don't need someone like me to tell you that Luke Humphries is a great scorer. But yeah, really impressive. Pieman beat Rob Cross in the final.
Yeah, and winning breeds winning, and we've seen it at first hand with Luke Humphries. He just looks like a different man now. He's had a couple of sort of marquee wins. His confidence has gone through the roof. He really believes in himself, and he's not put too much pressure on himself to go out and win these events. But I think he just has that sort of calmness about him, assuredness that we saw Johnny Clayton discover after winning the World Cup, where it's kind of like, okay, actually, I could do this against everyone now. I just turn up, do what I do in practice, and it'll be good enough. It's that assuredness that's when a good player turns into a great player. And we've seen it with Johnny Clayton, and we're seeing it now with Luke Humphries and with Damon Heta. Both of those two, as you say, are inevitably going to have a TV run at some point this year, and everyone's going to be saying, "Oh, they've come from nowhere." Well, they haven't really. They're showing all the signs now. Other people to mention from the Euro Tour this weekend: Rob Cross continues to play really well in about 50% of his tournaments, but what he normally does is he throws in a wobbler and manages to lose it or manages to go out. He tried to do it against Ross Smith in the quarterfinals of this one, where he just was averaging mid-80s for most of the game, and Ross Smith, for all his scoring, could not find a double, and he let Cross back into it. Cross went on, and yeah, he was a worthy finalist, and he actually played well in the final against Luke Humphries, but Humphries got a fast start, and that proved too much for Cross to pin back despite a late flurry. Jose de Souza, good to see Jose playing well again.
Yeah,
really
he's been
promising.
quiet.
Really promising after a tough few months for him. But I'll just say, out of sight, out of mind, some of the time with this Premier League section of the year where, you do forget about these guys. But it was more the worrying form at the back end of 21 that was concerning for Jose. And he was showing a bit of the old De Souza flair in the Euro Tour this weekend, miscounts. And yeah, it was good to see him back to doing what he does best, And credit to Vincent Van Der Waals, the last one I'll mention. Great to see him making a semi-final. And yeah, that's just classic Vincent, isn't he? He just, whatever year it is, you could fast forward 20 years' time, there'll be a 60-something-year-old Vincent Van Der Waals making a quarter-final somewhere in the calendar. He's just Mr. Consistent, and he's never going to go and win these tournaments, but he just seems to make a living out of him. And to do it, he effectively has done what James Wade has done, but to a slightly lower tier. He's just there year after year making a living out of it. He doesn't go away. The talent keeps flooding in, but he's a classic pro. If you don't turn up, he can beat you. And yeah, I like Vincent.
Great segue in there, really, Pieman, because I backed Vincent to beat Adrian Lewis at 6-4, and the talking point of the weekend was AD Lewis again kicking off with someone, and this week it was Gerwyn Price. I think AD tried to give Price a bit of a hug from behind. Gerwyn certainly didn't like that, and Twitter was making a point of Russ Bray has to break him up.
Nah.
He didn't have to. Russ Bray came over and got in between them, but it certainly wasn't, Dana White at a UFC weigh-in. But yeah, I mean, I like, what I always say about Lewis Pieman, darts is a better place when AD Lewis is playing well and falling out with people. That's what I want him to do. And he beat Gerwyn Price and he fell out with him. Brilliant.
Yeah, and look, Gerwyn Price is not someone you want to be hugging after he just lost the game. He can be a pretty gracious loser, to be fair, but he likes to pack his darts up and get off the stage. And these two have had history going years back, if you remember, where Lewis famously told him that he wouldn't win anything, and Price is now a world champion, and Lewis is sort of rotting at the bottom of the rankings. So
he said,
bit of irony there, but Lewis will have enjoyed that, giving him a beating. It's like, you might be at the top now, but I can still beat you. I loved it. Love watching it.
The famous interview Lewis said a few years ago, he said, and that's the difference between a great and not so great.
Yeah.
And he was referring to himself and Price being not so great, obviously. And, there's quite a lot happened since then. I think he's won 2 or 3 Grand Slams and a World Championship. So, right, that wraps it up for this week. Good chat there. And we'll be back next week. There's only a couple of weeks left of the regular season. And, of course, we will be previewing finals night where the final 4 go over to Germany. So thanks for watching and we'll speak to you soon.